Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Anomaly Sea Ice Challenge with the transhumanist Paragons of Pandroth. Last time we left off after a few days of calm and quiet, which we used to move our colony into a new base, and while food and power production momentarily took a bit of a hit, everything went smoothly, until in the second half of the episode things got chaotic. First, we had to protect a crashed Imperial shuttle, then the mysterious drifter Nightshade appeared and immediately decided to free our entities, which has landed her in prison, and finally, to top it all off, we had a psychic ship drop in accompanied by a solar flare, and so we now find ourselves in a bit of a pickle out here on the sea ice. And things get worse, as the psychic ship then also demands its first victim. Vulek suffers a sad wonder mental break, now joining Ellie, who is also still aimlessly wandering around. High time, I think, that we took care of that psychic ship, as long as we have some pawns still under our control, so let's send out Maniac and Lauren with sniper rifles to target the ship. As you can see, this does of course wake up the mechanoids protecting it, but those mechanoids will not stray too far away from the ship, so even though we do perhaps cut it a little bit too close for comfort here, this will be the approach: sneak in, take one or two potshots, but retreat as soon as the mechs come into range. Thankfully, our two sniper rifles outrange the mech's charge lands by quite a bit, so this may be a slow process, but ultimately it should guarantee success. While we then continue to chip away at the ship, Nazim is next with a potentially much more damaging mental break. He's going to free an entity. And well, that leaves Maniac and Lauren as the only pawns we control, and since both of them are too far away to do anything about this, and since neither one of our two ghouls are in range either, we have no choice but to watch Nazim go about his business. Thankfully then, he only frees Shambler Pete. Let's not take that as any sort of sign. Anyway, Pete is still incapacitated and will therefore pose no immediate threat. This leaves our two sharpshooters with a bit of time to continue targeting the mech cluster. At the moment, the lancers are unfortunately closing in a bit too quickly, so we are not really able to target the psychic ship itself, so that's why we're aiming at them instead, with some success. The solar flare then also comes to an end, so at least we can ramp up our food production again. That is, once we have taken care of the issue that is Shambler Pete, who is now back up on his feet and punching the wall to our containment cell, something we desperately need to stop. So, Jay and Midnight to the rescue, our two ghouls rush in and quickly pacify Pete, who can then be put back into his containment platform by Nazim. Our fight against the mechs, meanwhile, remains a slow but steady process. In the middle of the night, the first lancer finally falls, but I think we'll have to dispatch of all three that remain, as well as of the pikeman, before we can get a good shot at targeting the ship. And that pikeman then the next one to go down, which is actually huge, because its needle gun had the same range as our snipers. As the early morning rolls around then, the next mech is killed. Ellie has also snapped out of her mental break, although at this point I feel like it's only a matter of time before someone else takes her place. And unfortunately, that someone else is Lauren, who succumbs on the spot and enters a catatonic state. In Rimworld, that is apparently what eating without a table does to you. Either way, she is out of the fight, although luckily the mechs won't target her in this state. And even though Maniac gets off one more shot himself, he is then unfortunately next in line, now going berserk. We definitely need to do something about his scars and injuries, I think. But for now, we need to take him down, and that's where our friendly neighborhood ghoul police comes into play, Jay and Midnight doing their best to beat Maniac into submission. A short while later then, both Maniac and Lauren are safely back in bed, while Nazim takes up sharpshooting duties, and even though he remains all by himself for now, he does score another kill. And not only that, a few moments later, he also manages to shoot both arms off of the lancer here, effectively rendering it harmless, so at this point we can finally target the psychic droner again. And things are looking up. Volek comes out of his mental break too. Soon after, Ellie joins Nazim, and together they manage to dispatch of not only the Scyther, but also of the psychic ship itself. The armless Lancer and the 2 Militars are then the only 2 mechs remaining. The Lancer goes down quickly, the Militars are a bit more nimble, but eventually Jay and Midnight rush over to help, and so far they have won every fight they're in. And so a bit more peace and quiet returns to the sea ice, our little agri-hand Jerome eagerly planting more rice, and thus taking some of the load off of Maniac, who is still recovering. No longer recovering, but still imprisoned meanwhile, is our mysterious drifter Nightshade, and we are now going to set her free again, for her to join our ranks once more. Yes, we could have used the time in prison to convert her, but due to various circumstances that would have taken quite some time, I think, and I feel like she might be much more useful to us as a part of the colony. For starters, she has a medical skill of 8, just meeting the threshold needed to implant a human heart, and that's exactly what we have been stockpiling for several episodes now, to cure Lauren's artery blockage. And now strikes me as the perfect time to give her this upgrade, salvaged from a careless raider. With Lauren catatonic, she won't be able to do much about it. The operation then a success, and Maniac's recovery also goes smoothly, so at night we can watch as Elpis and Volek put down a power line to our deep drill, just so we can move the generator back into the base. I think that's just smarter to have it as part of our full power grid. Speaking of power, our current setup also requires fuel, so Volek is turning some of the wolf meat we acquired last episode into chem fuel, just before it deteriorates away. Sadly though, it seems like we are not over the hump yet in regards to mental breaks. Elp is now insanely rambling, and as a result, probably also bringing down the mood of those around him. Still, in the grand scheme of things, I feel like we are on an upwards trajectory. The remainder of the day remains thankfully uneventful, and in the early evening our deep drill is finally hooked back up to the grid, so we should have more steel incoming soon. Just around that time, Elpis also stops rambling and Nazim finishes researching Goju's, so we are now all in on the secrets of drug production and will probably cease researching for the moment until we can get a more efficient lab setup going. To celebrate our advancement then, we have ourselves another Pandrothian party, not waiting for Lauren for this one. Her catatonic state might last for another few days after all. Still, we rejoice in the arrival of colonist number 7 in Nightshade, although it still remains to be seen what her dark secret is, and whether or not she can be a permanent member of the colony. The party then a fun affair, earning us ideology development point number 9, only one more, and we can reform the Paragons of Pandroth for the very first time. Over the course of the night then, we disassemble the last remains of our old base, this time also removing the roof first, and with the sun slowly rising again, we can then salvage a decent amount of steel to kickstart our next small project. No, not the construction of a heater over here, although that one is most likely also much appreciated by our colonists, but instead the fabrication of a second lifter bot. Our first and so far only lifter, Rico, is already a valuable asset when it comes to hauling stuff from far away, and since our colonists' time will be much better used on work in and around the base, a second lifter makes sense to ensure that our people can focus on less mundane tasks. The gestation process is swiftly initiated. Lauren also returns, now with a brand new heart, while Maniac briefly helps out with the harvest, just so Agrihand Jerome does not become overwhelmed. As her first task on this day, Lauren then tailors 2 brand new wolfskin parkas. Her crafting skill of 19 should yield respectable results, so I am a bit disappointed with her only producing normal quality here. Still, it's an upgrade for Nightshade, and number 2 should hopefully be better. Before we can take a closer look at it, however, we receive a distress signal. We've had one of these before, and it turned out to be a colony overgrown by flesh and overrun by flesh beasts. Perhaps it's the same this time around. We'll only know for sure once we investigate the site, as the colony begging for help here is sadly slim on the details. For the moment, however, we are in no rush. Let's get our own place in better shape first. A second shard beacon is constructed for improved psychic ritual quality. Lauren's second Parker, then also an excellent piece of work. And with the sun lamp not consuming any power at night, we use this time to smelt some of the remains of the mech cluster and previous raids. Volek's first attempt at converting Nightshade to the Paragons of Pandroth then not exactly met with success, a meager 8% certainty reduction. That's why I did not want to keep her imprisoned. It would have taken quite some time to make her see things our way. And well before she sees things our way, she sees terrifying hallucinations, and will now randomly flee from anyone or anything she perceives as a threat. The cause for all of this? The audacity of assigning our children some recreation time. Her ideology leans a bit more on the stricter side when it comes to children, so one more reason to keep at it with the conversion efforts. Her ideology, however, might be our smallest problem, as it is now finally revealed what plagues Nightshade: organ decay. All of her vital organs are rotting away inside of her, and we don't have much time here. Those will need to be replaced as soon as possible if we want to keep her alive. Now, admittedly, compared to some of the other potential downsides she could have had, this is probably one of the better ones. Nonetheless, if Randy decides to just keep away human raiders for a while, we might have a problem on our hands. Still, nothing we can do about her ailment at the moment, so instead let's fire up our brand new machining table to deconstruct some of those mechanoids we killed earlier, another good source of steel that Volek is then swiftly turning into more components. Those in turn are used to construct a second solar panel in the evening. On the sea ice, the solar panel is a bit more of a mixed bag. It can always be relied on to produce some power, but for large parts of the year it will not put out much. Still, compared to other biomes, it is actually a fairly steady source of power, albeit again with a somewhat reduced output. A few hours after midnight then, Nightshade's hallucinations at least subside, but still her situation is dire, and somewhat ironic, considering that just moments before her condition was revealed to us, we used a spare heart on Lauren, who did not really need it as much as Nightshade does. Nonetheless, life continues. On the next morning, 2 more hydroponics basins are constructed, just so we get the most out of our setup. Any rice we don't consume can be turned into chem fuel, which then again fuels the hydroponics. A short while later, lifter bot number 2 then emerges, now receiving the rather robotic name of AXMI24, as always after the patron supporter of the same name. Later, on that same otherwise uneventful day, Ellie then throws a tantrum. Despite our nutrient-paste dispenser chock full of rice, she somehow managed to get hungry and will now break stuff around the base, so we're having Lauren babysit her a bit to ensure that nothing gets destroyed. The night then is used to do more smelting work. Now that we have 2 lifter bots, we can bring back some of the steel weapons that were used against us in that breaching raid we had in episode 9. This conveniently also helps us manage wealth a bit, as all of those weapons did in fact count towards our total colony value. On the following morning, just as we make room to construct a 4th chem fuel generator, Elpis then suffers a mental break. He goes on an insulting spree, but only because he was insulted first himself. Not quite sure by whom, but he picks Lauren as his first target for his revenge. Quickly getting back to colony wealth once more, however, by smelting a lot over the last few days, we have actually managed to reduce wealth to below 81,000, which is actually the threshold for moderate expectations and a few ideology-related mood effects too, so perhaps we can keep it there for a little while. That would certainly help our mood. Outright amazing news then in the afternoon. This is something that I really had hoped for, but it's certainly not guaranteed. We have located a mechanitor complex. That means we could now turn a second pawn into a mechanitor, just like Volek. That is, if we can clear out the complex first, which will obviously house a few threats. On the bright side, it is very close to our home, and I think I also already know who would make for an excellent second candidate. Lauren here, with a crafting skill of 19 and an intellectual skill of 16. Her background as junkyard mechanic also seems awfully fitting, and as a former military officer, perhaps we can get her to command some combat mechs. Let me know what you think about this, and if you have someone else in mind, I would of course also like to hear it. Our machining table is then fired up once more in the evening, this time not to disassemble a mech, but instead to manufacture a prosthetic heart. Poor Nightshade will immediately die should her heart cease to function, while she can, in theory, lose a liver or a lung, only not both. So, worst case scenario, we might need someone in the colony to donate a liver or a lung to keep her alive, a very selfless act that perhaps the former members of the Believers of Boyo would be willing to perform. Before things get really dicey though, we have a bit more time that we can now spend on improving our shelter a bit. This time we are not just slapping down concrete, but instead paved tiles for a bit more beauty at a slightly higher material cost. The resulting improvement to room impressiveness also immediately pays dividends as we begin a conversion ritual for Nightshade. As you can see here, we are back to moderate expectations already, but there is still an almost 70% chance of this ritual having a positive outcome. And well, what can I say, Vulex seems awfully persuasive today, performing a masterful ritual to immediately convert Nightshade to the Paragons of Pandroth. As a result, we also earn the final ideology development point we needed, as well as a lovely mood bonus for the entire colony. So, we are now indeed ready for our first ideology reform, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. For now, it is time for little Elpis to put his medical skill of only 4 to good use. Let's see if he can successfully perform a heart transplant. And what do you know, the 10-year-old seems gifted by the void and actually pulls it off. Nightshade's rotting heart has been replaced. Now we only need to save her lungs and kidneys. Apologies, I misspoke earlier when I said livers. Elpis's medical skill also took a big jump, now almost at level 7, so he is quickly becoming more competent. Lauren, meanwhile, is up next with a mental break, thankfully only after making that heart. This one is also no surprise. She was insulted a grand total of 7 times by Elpis, and now consequently hates the kid. Let's see if that relationship can be mended over time. With a bit more steel incoming, our flooring project then keeps going, but it will likely take a little while longer still until the room is deemed a nice place to live in. Now, as another day comes to a close here, let's talk ideology, specifically the meme that we want to choose next. I don't think we need to do this immediately in the next episode. After all, we have far from fully explored the transhumanist meme yet, but that's only going to be a matter of time. At the moment, I have a few memes on my list that I think would work well, beginning with the 2 added by Anomaly. Ritualist here would allow us to fully embrace the psychic ritual side of things, albeit at the cost of reduced research speed. A bit of a mixed bag if you ask me, and perhaps not the best fit for a transhumanist colony. So how about Inhuman? Seeing humanity as a barrier to our pawn's connection with the machine god, that feels like a reasonable extension to their transhumanist beliefs. However, this also comes with a plethora of other changes and requirements, mostly the desire to become inhuman, which is quite impactful and removes many of the things that make a pawn human, including their social relationships. Definitely a noticeable change in tone, so perhaps we are not quite ready for it yet. So how about Raider instead? This series in particular has seen us travel to other towns rather frequently. Keep in mind that the entire adventure on the sea ice began by us attacking a pigskin colony, and even though our travels are not always for raiding purposes, at least not strictly speaking, I would consider tomb exploration to be in a similar vein. Picking this meme would also mean that we would need to go raiding regularly, perhaps a bit of a welcome nudge towards exploring the world and meeting its inhabitants. So those would be the 3 memes I currently consider to fit our series nicely, but again, if you have different ones in mind, then please let me know. And just like that, I think we have once again reached a good point to make the cut for today. And since I am finally back from my vacation, that also means that it's time for more fan art. This week we have submissions from Gracie, Isaac Young, Lex Path and Penguin Crazy, all capturing the sometimes horrifying, sometimes comical vibes of this series very nicely. And I want to take a moment here not only to thank you for sending stuff in, but also to say that I really appreciate that in this age of emerging artificial intelligence, there is still so many of you taking their time and drawing something themselves. I know that I have featured AI art in the past, and I also believe that there can be a niche for it, but there is nothing that compares to people creating something of their own, capturing those feelings and emotions that add so much to this series. So thanks again to anyone who has submitted something, not only today but over the past few years. It definitely means a whole lot to me. And with that, let's wrap things up for today. As always, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course go ahead and subscribe to stay up to date, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.